On Saturday, the city of Detroit heard from Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein. She talked about her Green New Deal proposal to create jobs and address climate change. Her running mate, this is human rights activist Ajamu Baraka, spoke just before she took the stage for about 20 minutes.
Are you ready to make history? I said, are you ready to make history? Test, test. My brothers and sisters, it is my honor and my pleasure to be with you this afternoon, where we are, in fact, making history. Before I go into my very brief remarks, because we want to hear some more from our local folks who are running for office, and of course we have the treat of the day coming before us, and that is Dr. Jill Stein. But I want to thank the organizers of this event. You know, those of us who put on these kinds of events, we know how much work this entails, and so it's important that we always thank the folks who sometimes we don't see, but who are responsible for pulling all of this together today. So thank you. We want to also thank this outstanding band and this incredible music today. It has helped to move the day and to keep us in high spirits. And we have to be in high spirits because we have some difficult work to do. Because when you talk about trying to make history, you're talking about trying to change history, to disconnect, to de-link from what is already in place. And that takes a tremendous effort. But it also takes a real commitment to understanding the power of the people and understanding what has to be done to make that leap into a new kind of historical condition. It means that the struggle that we are engaged in, my friends, is a struggle to transform consciousness also. That is not just enough to talk about the political contradictions. We have to build a social movement and a new kind of psychology in this country also. What that means, my friends, is that we are part of a movement. We have to remind ourselves that what we are doing is, in fact, to build a new kind of people's movement. I tell folks wherever I go over these last 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks or so, that it's important for us to look at and to participate and to vote, but we have to also remind ourselves that we are in a protracted struggle for revolutionary change. You see, some of us don't play with that word revolution. We understand its importance. We understand its seriousness. And we understand that we can't make revolutionary change without the people. So what we are doing with this campaign, what all of you are involved in with this work, is the work of transforming people's understandings and awareness, of helping people to understand that they truly have the power in their own hands. And that is so profoundly important because the powers that be, they don't want us to understand that. They fearmonger. They want us to believe that basically politics has to be defined from the top down. They want us to believe that the only options we have in terms of traditional politics is to vote for Tweedledee or Tweedledum. But we are here to say no more. But my friends, that means we have to be engaged with the people. It means that we have to struggle with folks because they have been very effective in that fear-mongering. And that's why some people are reluctant to step out with us at this point. Now, we've had a tremendous number of people who have come our way over the last month and a half or so. And people are still kind of looking and wondering, you know, should they make the plunge? You know, should they come out in our direction? And that's all right. What we're going to do these next 2 months is to continue to engage the people, to show through our own example how you confront and overcome fear, to blaze the trail, if you will, so that people understand that there can be an alternative, and that alternative is, in fact, the Green Party. That is why it is so important what we had today in terms of giving all of you an opportunity to meet many of the people who are running under the Green Party banner. Because as Dr. Stein and myself will always remind us, this is about building the apparatus. This campaign is about building popular power. It's not just about me and Dr. Stein. It's about all of the other candidates who are running. It is about organizing and strengthening our state apparatuses across the country. It's about putting in place the instruments that we need in order to express and exercise real popular power here in this country. That is how you build a revolutionary process. We want to link up with all of the incredible work that people are doing around this country. People who are part of the various social movements, some who are not yet ready to engage in the electoral process. We want to engage those folks. Many of them are looking very closely at what we're doing. Many of them have said to me directly that, you know what, as a consequence of the decision that Dr. Stein made and bringing you on and looking at this party a little closer, you know, I'm thinking twice about how I should relate to the electoral process. That conversation I've been having across the country, that people who understand or are committed to revolutionary change, they are now re-examining how we relate to the electoral system. Now, for me, I've always understood its potential. I've always said that basically you can't be serious about organizing this country if you don't engage the state, if you don't figure out a way to creatively deal with the electoral system, that if you see a city council spot or a spot on a local board of education or even a state rep spot, and you can't organize and take that, well, it only takes in many cases a few thousand votes, then you might need to re-examine what you are doing in terms of your organizing, okay? Those spots in many cases are there for us to take. That is part of the process of building alternative power. Now, it doesn't just mean that, you know, individuals should just jump up and run. That's all right to a certain extent. But what I'm talking about, my friends, is using and participating in the electoral process as part of a broader strategy for transformation. It is part of a strategy for building long-term power, okay? It is not the end, but in fact, the beginning. We say that when we walk into this White House next year, Dr. Stein and myself, when we walk into this White House in D.C., that is not the end point. That's the beginning point. We understand that this struggle that we are part of is a struggle for real transformation. We understand that we're not going to be able to enact our transitional program reflected in our platform without the organized people participating and committed to real change. So when we go to DC, we don't expect demobilization. We don't expect disengagement and disempowerment. We expect for people to continue to struggle, to be engaged, and to have that vision close to their hearts and understand that basically we are at the beginning point of a historical transformation that will happen here in this country. My friends, this has been such an educational experience for me these last few weeks. I've had a chance to talk with people across the country and to hear some of the serious questions that they are raising. And they're raising serious questions because they are seeing also, too, that they're not going to allow themselves to be roped into this false choice of just having two elite corporate parties to choose from. They are asking the question, why do we still have 20 million people without adequate health care? And why is it that for those millions that have health care today under the Affordable Care Act, people are still scared to use it? They're saying, what kind of society do we have, and why do we have a situation where members of the African American family in this country are frightened every time they leave the house and every time a police car falls in behind them when they're driving? What kind of society is that? They are raising the question as to why is it that in our society, in our communities, that we have people who, are suffering unnecessarily from all kinds of diseases because their communities were used as waste dumps, toxic waste dumps. They say, why do we have to have a society and a state in which we are supposed to be at permanent war? Why do we have millions of people who would like to work full-time but can't find a full-time job? But yet they tell us that we are supposed to be experiencing an economic recovery from 2008. But folks are saying, you know what? We don't feel it. So they are raising these serious questions, and we are there, and you have to be there to provide some of the transitional answers. And the main answer that we have to provide is this: we have to build a functioning democracy here in this country. We have to build effective, popular people power in this country. That's how we deal with those issues. So, as I get ready to take my seat, let me just say this in closing. My approach in this campaign is, I tell folks for this campaign, there will be no lies here, no compromise, and no fear. No lies in the sense that, we believe in the ability of the people to understand reality. We're not going to pander to the people. We're not going to assume that you can't understand the complexities of governance. We're not going to do what the Democratic Party did when it came to the Black Lives Matter movement, when instead of engaging and standing with them, all they wanted to do was to manage them to engage in a public relations stunt. In this campaign, we say to the Black Lives Matter movement, that not only do we support your platform, because your platform in many parts is almost word for word our platform, then not only do we stand with you, we're going to put our bodies on the line to make sure that no one else suffers in this country in those ways. We say no compromise. When we walk into power, we're not going to make the mistake that some progressive and left organizations and parties have done, where they end up becoming hyper-pragmatic, or where they end up, in essence, managing the affairs of the elite. When we walk into office, we're going to make sure that we uphold the principles and ideals and the values of this party and our campaign, and there'll be no compromise for that. And we say no fear. We're not afraid of Donald Trump or anybody. We understand the power of the people. And so when we say no fear, we say that basically we're not going to stop ourselves from representing the masses of the people who support us. We're not going to be concerned about a Donald Trump or anybody else, because we understand that basically it is the power of the people that can trump Trump. Okay? So my friends, as human beings, we don't have the ability to control the historical conditions that we find ourselves in. But we have the ability to decide how we respond to those historical conditions. And we say in this campaign, Dr. Stein and myself, we say in this campaign, we have decided to fight. We're not going to fight for you. We're going to fight with you to transform our conditions. As Dr. Stein says, we have the power. The power is in our hands. We stand with Jill. We stand with the people. The power is in our hands. Take it back, put it back in yourselves, and understand the power you have, and let's make history. Thank you.
About you, Baraka.
After her running mate spoke, Jill Stein addressed voters and supporters in Detroit. She talked about how the city and Michigan have been affected by trade agreements like NAFTA, which she believes have closed factories and exported American jobs. Her remarks are 50 minutes.
Woo! All right. Wow. I would say this is what democracy looks like, and that is what democracy sounds like. Because what's the point of a revolution if we can't dance to it? So it is so beautiful. It is so wonderful. I can't tell you how exciting it is to be here in Detroit and in Michigan, the center of the struggle, the center of the fight back, where you are making history. What is happening in Detroit is what is coming to all of America. But what is so amazing about Detroit is that you are on the front line, but you refuse to fall in line. And you are standing up. You are standing up for all of us. You are standing up for our right to clean water for everyone as a human right. You are standing up for us for the right to a school system which provides high-quality public education for every child in every community. You are standing up for our right to a food system which is healthy for workers and for people, for our communities and our planet. You are saying no to food deserts. You are saying no to an industrial food system that is poisoning our workers, our families, our communities, and our planet. And you are saying no to the takeover of our democracy through these fiscal control boards that are driving our schools and our communities into the ground. Thank you for leading the charge for real democracy. And you are saying no to this system of political prisoners that has imprisoned real heroes of democracy like Reverend Pinckney, Reverend Edward Pinckney. So you are standing up for us all because Detroit is a state of emergency in a nation which is in a state of emergency. They tell us that we are in a recovery, but we know better. The Congressional Budget Office just came out with a report the other day, and what they said was that the top 10%, the richest 10%, has 75% of the wealth in this country, and what that leaves is absolutely staggering. When you look at what is left to the lower 50%, that's 1 out of every 2 people in this country, 50% has less than 1% of the wealth and resources. This is economic disparities on steroids. This cannot be allowed. We say no to this economy of a predatory economy and a predatory distribution of wealth. And we say no to a military system which is taking up more than 50% of our discretionary budget. And it is not making us safer, it is making us less safe. In fact, it has cost us $6 trillion by the time we've paid for the ongoing health care costs, for our wounded soldiers, for whom we must do much more, who should never be put in harm's way to start with. But the bottom line is for 2 wars alone, that is Afghanistan and Iraq, paying the costs of those 2 wars alone will cost us $6 trillion before we are done. Do you know what that means for every household in America? That is $50,000 that you will have put into these wars. This is almost half of our income taxes that goes to pay for the costs of this massive military budget. And what do we have to show for it? Failed states, mass refugee migrations which are tearing apart the Middle East and Western Europe, and worse terrorist threats. It's not getting better, it's getting bigger, it's multiplying, it's getting more dangerous and more vicious. These wars on terror are only creating more terror, and they are making us bankrupt in addition. We do not need, and we cannot allow, for our budget to be providing approximately 1,000 bases. I say approximately because who's counting? 1,000 bases in something like 100 countries around the world. No country in history has ever done this. This is what is called a dying empire. When you add up all the bases, all the foreign bases of all other countries around the world, do you know what it comes to? About 30 bases. All of the other countries have 30, and we alone have 1,000. There is something wrong with this picture. This is unjust. This is unsustainable. This is unacceptable. The good news, and there's lots of good news, let me just stress, in the same way that Detroit is fighting back, we must all fight back. And I just want to give a shout out right now. There are so many in Detroit and in Michigan who are fighting back, who are saying no to fracking, which just appears to have caused another major earthquake at the center of fracking in Oklahoma. More power to Michigan for standing up to try to outlaw this outrageous, dangerous, and toxic practice. And in fact, we will build on that if we have the honor of turning the White House into a greenhouse. We will ban, on day one, we will seek to put an immediate halt on all new fossil fuel infrastructure, starting on day one. Because if the EPA was actually empowered to protect the environment and to protect our lives that depend on it, there would be no additional fossil fuel facilities established in the United States of America, period. So I applaud the referendum to ban fracking here in Michigan. I also applaud the teachers, the valiant teachers who led the way to stand up on those rolling sick-outs that actually got rid of the head of the school control board and showed them who really is in charge here. And I applaud you for that struggle to dignify our teachers, to support their unions, to dignify our students and our communities, for whom it is an absolute outrage and a human rights violation that they are going to these decaying schools with rodents, with mold, with lacking heat in the winter. This is unacceptable. This is a human rights violation. Every school needs to be a good, excellent, quality school for all children. And by the way, we're not asking for anything more than what the heads of this so-called education reform, the Arnie Duncans, the Rahm Emanuels, what do they provide for their children? It's not schools with high-stakes testing. It's schools that teach to the whole student for lifetime learning with music, with art, with recreation, with community engagement, and small classroom size. And by the way, if we want to truly educate our children, it's not rocket science how to do that. It means small classroom size, and it means bringing kids to school who are ready to learn, which means not afflicted by poverty, the greatest obstacle to education that there is. So I applaud Detroit for leading the way. And just about this good news, you know, this good news is also the local food economy that's been created by Detroit. In the middle of a food desert, you have rediscovered food sovereignty and healthy and sustainable local food production. This is a model for the nation. Thank you, Detroit. So the good news that you are creating in Detroit is the good news that we must bring to America. Because in fact, this is a democracy. We are not limited to just two deadly choices. And let me add to that, we are also the alternative that many Trump supporters are actually looking for, because many of Trump's supporters actually are not motivated by supporting Donald Trump. They're motivated by being terrified of Hillary Clinton. We need to give them another way to oppose Hillary Clinton. So let me just go through some of the good news, because we're told to think that the problems we have are absolutely unsolvable. They are inevitable. Resistance is futile. We should just go home and lie down on the railroad tracks. But we got news for them. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We've got it, and we intend to use it. So part of using that power is by debunking and opposing this nonsense that tells us that these problems are unsolvable. They say that we have to choose between a job or a climate, between an economy or an environment. In fact, the truth is, we cannot have one without the other. They only come together. That is why we are supporting, as the major plank in our platform, a Green New Deal, an emergency jobs program. It will create 20 million jobs that not only revive the economy, but they also halt this crisis of climate change. And we know about this crisis. Every month is setting a new world record for the warmest month of that name. We've just seen the fires up and down the West Coast displacing 100,000 people. And we've seen the floods in Louisiana. And the recent science, the most recent cutting-edge climate science, is telling us now we don't have time to fiddle around here. We need to get down to work. And just to be clear, what that science says, this was described by a senior scientist from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who was speaking in front of a insurance agency conference a couple months ago. And she described what she called an "oh my God" report. If you haven't heard about it yet, it's no surprise. The corporate media has not yet covered it, but NOAA will soon be coming out with the written reports on this that basically say, if we don't fundamentally do a 180 on our energy policy right away, that we are looking at as much as 9 feet of sea level rise as soon as 2050. 9 feet is not a hit that civilization can sustain. It is every population center on the coasts around the world. This is not something we have to try to deal with, including somewhere around 16 nuclear power plants at sea level here in the US alone, which will all go Fukushima. We cannot afford that. This is why we must stand up, like our lives depend on it, for a Green New Deal that will zero out fossil fuels by 2030. And in doing so, we create the jobs that are not just good for the economy, not just good for the planet, they're especially good for workers. Because when a worker walks into a fossil fuel job now, their risk of dying on the job goes up 700% just for walking in the door into a refinery or onto a frack site or into one of the trucks that's driving this toxic and explosive stuff around. They are not protected. The drivers in the fossil fuel industry are not protected like drivers in other industries. It's absolutely outrageous how our workers have been on the front lines of this crisis. And when I've gone to talk to them, when I've gone to support their picket lines, when they are striking for safer working conditions and for health benefits, what I hear from them is they can't wait for a Green New Deal. When they actually have a chance to hear about it, they are ready for it. And we say to the workers, not only in fossil fuel industry, but also in the war industry, we say to you, we promise, we guarantee a just transition. You will not be displaced. You will not be put out of a job. You will not be put out of benefits. You will move to a better job and a healthier job, which is good for all of us, for workers and our communities. So the good news about the Green New Deal, we will create 20 million jobs. How will we do it? We will do it like we already did it in the New Deal. This isn't rocket science. We can do this, and there are many ways. So we will provide grants and incentives, particularly to small businesses, to worker cooperatives, to nonprofits, to start up the small businesses we need to transform our energy supply, to insulate and weatherize our buildings, to create the efficiency devices that we need to move into this new economy. We will create the factories. This is the anti-NAFTA program. This is the anti-TPP program. This is about bringing back the jobs that we need right here and elevating our wages and adopting a minimum living wage of $15 an hour for starters. And we are talking about the human right to a job for everyone who is ready and willing to work. You have a job in the new Green Deal. So we will revive the economy, we will turn the tide on climate change, and because we move to 100% clean renewable energy, an infinite wars for oil obsolete. So another piece of good news. You may remember one of the founders of the neoconservative war hawk ideology, a guy named Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was part of, yes, he was the founder of the neocon vision that America would take over the Middle East and that America would take over Asia. Well, guess what? He's changed his mind. He retracts his proposal. He says it's time to join the community of nations. It's time to replace domination with cooperation and collaboration. But somehow the other neocons have not heard about this yet. That's why we must be in the presidential debates. We must be there to challenge this propaganda that tries to justify these catastrophic regime change wars. The only way they have a prayer of pushing forward with this outrageous failed policy is if they silence the truth and they silence the opposition. That is why we are going to put our bodies on the line for democracy and for open debates. In this election, we are not just deciding what kind of a world we will be, but whether we will have a world or not going forward. On climate change, whether we will declare a climate emergency and create a Green New Deal to create a wartime scale mobilization. If we thought Pearl Harbor was a national emergency, how about losing all of our harbors? That's what we are looking at. If we are not in the debate, we will not have anyone to tell the truth about these outrageous wars, why we need to cut the military in half, this dangerous, bloated military budget, and put those dollars into true security here at home with our schools and our health care and our hospitals and creating jobs. And our lives are also on the line on nuclear weapons. Hillary Clinton, it's not just Donald Trump. We should have a lot of trouble sleeping if Donald Trump gets elected, but we should also have a lot of trouble sleeping if Hillary Clinton gets elected. What Donald Trump says is absolutely despicable, but Hillary Clinton's record is no better. If you look at, yes, Donald Trump is very blunt, and he says things in an extremely horrifying way, but I have to say Hillary's track record, although she speaks much nicer, but when you look at what she's done, it's absolutely terrifying. The war in Libya should not be the prototype of our foreign policy. And Hillary wants to start an air war over Syria. That's what a no-fly zone is. It's an air war with Russia. We have 2,000 nuclear weapons on hair trigger alert. We cannot, by any means, begin to think that there will not be reasons for those hair triggers to get triggered if we are at war with Russia in the skies of Syria. We cannot go down that dark alley. We cannot do that. We need a new way forward in the Middle East, a new kind of offensive. It's called a peace offensive in the Middle East. And it starts with a weapons embargo. Fortunately, since we are providing the vast majority of the weapons to the Middle East, including over $100 billion worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia, who can do whatever they like with them. Saudi Arabia, who Hillary Clinton herself named as the main sponsor of Sunni jihad terrorism still in this day and age. This was a leaked memo from Hillary's State Department identifying our allies, the Saudis, as still the leading sponsor of jihadi terrorism around the world. So we say that gives us enormous power since we are arming terrorism. We and our allies are funding terrorism. We and our allies helped found terrorism. If you actually go back to Afghanistan and the Mujahideen, this is terrorism that has come back to bite us with a vengeance. We cannot simultaneously fund terrorism. Let me put it another way. We cannot simultaneously fight terrorism while we are funding terrorism, arming terrorism, and training terrorism with our allies. We got this mess started. We can shut it down with a weapons embargo, with a freeze on the bank accounts of those countries that continue to fund terrorist enterprises. And we can persuade our allies in Turkey. We persuaded Turkey to close its border to the movement of desperate refugees. Unfortunately, if they could close their border to desperate refugees, it's time to close their border to the movement of jihadi militias. So we do have the power to shut down this insane war. Who is this war benefiting? And I mean the war of the last 15 years. Who is benefiting from this? One entity. It's called the war profiteers are benefiting from this insane war. And it is the war profiteers and the neocons in the Democratic as well as the Republican Party who are pushing now to demonize Russia and China to justify their big war budget, like their F-35 weapon system, which is obsolete before it gets off of the production line. We do not need this bloated military budget. We do not need a foreign policy based on military and economic domination. We need a foreign policy based on international law, human rights, and diplomacy. That is the way forward. And that applies, by the way, that applies across the board. We must not be in the business of funding or arming our allies who are systematically and massively violating human rights and international law. That includes, and we need to say this with all humility, of course, because we ourselves are as guilty as anyone. Let's be clear about that. But we need to say to our partners, including the Netanyahu government in Israel, including the Saudis, each of them are basically war criminals and are violating international law and human rights systematically in so many ways. It's time to stop funding and arming the violation of human rights. So what this means is then actually we have lots of resources as we cut this bloated and dangerous military budget. We have resources to put back into what we need to do here at home. And this is one of the ways we pay for the Green New Deal, but there's another way that the Green New Deal pays for itself. This is another good news story, and that is the fact as we zero out pollution, we get so much healthier so quickly that the savings in health care, but it's really sick care that we have, the savings in this sick care system are enough to pay the costs of the green energy transition all by itself. This is a win-win-win. While we're at it, It's also time to create health care as a human right for every American under Medicare for all. It is unacceptable. It is unacceptable and outrageous and immoral. 1 out of every 3 Americans is denied health care now. Even if they have Obamacare, they cannot afford to use it because it's a boondoggle for the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies for them to be able to charge $400 for a life-saving EpiPen that contains $1 worth of medication is absolutely unacceptable, and we will not allow it. And this is how Medicare for all also pays for itself. It's not like we got to come up with a whole lot of new money. All we got to do is redirect that money from bureaucracy, from waste, from paper pushing, from exorbitant CEO profits, and put dollars into real health care to cover everyone in, nobody out, cradle to grave, head to toe, your pharmaceuticals, your hearing aid, your insulin pump, the whole 9 yards can be included once we begin to have a healthcare system that is run for people, not for profit. A couple other really quick mentions, because I know we're getting to the end of our time. Thank you. On immigrant rights, let's be clear. We owe a welcoming path to citizenship. Not just a path, a welcoming path to citizenship that celebrates the immigrants who have always been at the core of our economies and our communities. And let's be clear that the most powerful thing we can do to fix the immigration crisis is to stop causing it in the first place. That means no more NAFTAs. NAFTA displaced millions of farmers, sent them streaming over the border in order to feed their families. These are economic refugees. It means ending the drug wars, which will be good for us here and good on the other side of the border. We need to treat drug problems as health problems, not criminal problems. Because there are 100,000 lives lost in Mexico alone over the last 5 to 7 years from these drug wars. It's time to end the drug wars for once and for all. And it's time, actually, to pardon all of those who've been wrongly incarcerated for a substance I can tell you with the authority of a medical doctor that marijuana is a substance which is dangerous because it's illegal. It is far less dangerous than alcohol and nicotine. So let's send home from jail all those who should not have been put there in the first place. Not only send them home, but send them home with job training and a real job at a $15 an hour minimum wage. As part of the Green New Deal, everyone gets a job. And let me also say, about this crisis of violence that afflicts us in this country. We are a garrison state where everyone, not everyone, but way too many people feel like they need to have a gun in order to be safe. We say it's time to declare a truce, and it's time for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to get down to the bottom of this climate of hate, fear, and racism, and to put it behind us with a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Because even though we got the Emancipation Proclamation, it didn't end there, because the criminal institution of slavery was followed by lynchings, which were followed by Jim Crow, which was followed by the redlining of communities, which was followed by segregation, which was followed by the drug wars and mass incarceration and police violence. This is not new. What's new are the video cameras that are documenting it, and also this broken windows policies and the militarization of our police, which must all be brought to an end now. So we support the Black Lives Matter campaign. We support, unlike the Democrats, who you may have heard recently, the leaked emails said, just pat them on the head and send them on their way. They couldn't be more wrong. This is another reason why we need to vote the bums out, why the lesser evil is part of a race to the bottom. Yes, Donald Trump is terrible on immigration, on racism, on Islamophobia. But we say deporting immigrants is not worse than bombing Muslims around the world. That is not okay either. It's not okay to deport Muslims, and it's not okay to bomb their countries. Likewise, the immigration policies that Donald wants to resurrect are part of what's been around for the last 10, 15 years. These are not new. This is what was created by the Democratic and Republican parties. Why the Republicans are the party of hate and fear, the Democrats are the party of deportation and detention and night raids, more than all other presidents in the 20th century. So forget this propaganda that tells you things will be fine with the lesser evil. You know, in fact, what are they doing to promote Hillary? They're not talking about Hillary. They're just talking about how terrible Donald Trump is. Well, that doesn't do it. Democracy needs a vision. Democracy needs a moral compass. Democracy needs us to lead the way. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Like Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. We must be that demand. It will not come from a lesser evil politician. And by the way, what is lifting up this right-wing extremism from which Donald Trump gets his support? This is growing out of the crisis of globalization, the crisis of financialization, the crisis of these global corporate trade deals that give the power to the global economic elite and force workers into this race to the bottom across borders against each other. Where did these policies come from? Oh, I think it was Bill Clinton, with the support of Hillary, that gave us NAFTA, that gave us Wall Street deregulation, that brought the crash of our economy down on our heads. So unfortunately, the Democrats are not the solution to Donald Trump. They are part of the problem that has given us Donald Trump. Putting another Clinton in the White House is not the solution. There's a saying that goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Let's not be fooled. Let's not let our friends be fooled. Let's not let our families and our communities be fooled. Let's get out there and talk to people and tell them the truth, that we can have an America and a world that works for all of us. Just so you know the strength of your numbers. 1 point, we are coming up in the polls, even though the polls are mainly expected voters, usual voters, predicted voters, but we are all about empowering all of America, disenfranchised voters, to come back and come out. This is half of the potential American vote that we can bring out for the first time. So the numbers, don't be fooled by them. And remember this, we are coming up in the polls despite the fact that there is a media blackout. Donald Trump has had $4 billion worth of free media. Hillary Clinton has had $2 billion. We've had essentially zip, yet we are coming up without that support by word of mouth, by way of what we do, how we tell and mobilize each other. I don't know how many of you saw the CNN town hall meeting that Ajamu, Baraka, and I were able to do. It was basically 90 minutes. It was basically 90 minutes solid of what you cannot say on primetime TV. We said it, and people loved it, and they heard what they are dying to hear, and we were trending #1 on Twitter. So who would say the American public is not ready for truth and justice? They are ready for truth and justice. We are ready for truth and justice. And the one last thing I want to leave you with to know your power is this. There are 43 million young people and not so young people who are trapped in predatory student loan debt with no way out, without the jobs to pay that debt back. This was a predatory agreement. The contract already got torn up by Wall Street when they crashed the economy. The jobs are not there. So we say if the contract was torn up by Wall Street, then it should be torn up for the young people who are the victims of Wall Street. If our misleaders could find it in their hearts to bail out the crooks who crashed the economy with their waste, fraud, and abuse on Wall Street, we can and we will bail out a young generation, the victims of Wall Street who need to be liberated to lead our way forward. Because social transformation, the hard work of transforming society, has always been led by the millennial generation, whether it was the civil rights movement or the Black Lives Matter movement or the peace movement or the immigrant rights movement or the climate justice movement. It is all being led by the millennials, even though they have two hands tied behind their backs right now. We need to liberate them to lead the way forward for all of us, for an economy of the future, for the climate of the future, for the justice of the future. We need the millennials to lead the way forward. We can have an America and a world that works for all of us. We have the numbers because 43 million young people Here's the secret. 43 million is enough to win a 3-way presidential race. We don't have to be satisfied or accused of splitting the vote. We can flip the vote by empowering young people to come out and take over this election and win it, to cancel student debt, to make higher education free in our public institutions, to create health care as a human right, to create a welcoming path to citizenship, to end police violence and institutional racism, and to create a foreign policy based on international law and human rights, and a Green New Deal that will end the crisis of our economy and our climate. We can do this. We do have the power. We have the solutions. This is not rocket science. This is taking the best of what is already working out there, and we have the numbers to win the day. We can create an America and a world that works for all of us, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. The power to create that world is not in our hopes. It's not just in our dreams. Right here and now in Detroit, Michigan, it's in our hands. Thank you so much for making it so. Together we are unstoppable.